Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traore, Africa's youngest president, is carrying out the mission for which Thomas Sankara was terminated. That is, distancing his country from the West. By eschewing Western dominance and establishing new ties with non-Western nations, he made the decision to restore Burkina Faso to its former glory. In addition, he aimed to use Burkina Faso's resources to make country independent, wealthy, and strong. He was therefore replaced and terminated because he intended to deny the West the natural resources it was obtaining at a lower cost. Ibrahim Traore is scaring and challenging the West, nevertheless, going beyond what Thomas Sankara had in mind. He is portraying himself as Africa's most courageous and fearless leader by forming ties with nations that the West considers adversaries. However, what recent actions of his have alarmed the West, and they intend to displace him like they did with Muammar Gaddafi or Thomas Sankara, and most likely terminate him. Let's watch this video to find out. According to the Burkina Faso presidency, a Russian delegation recently had talks with Ibrahim Traore, the country's temporary president, on possible military cooperation. President Traore's previous discussions with Russian President Vladimir Putin during the Russia-Africa Summit in St. Petersburg last July were followed by the delegation, which was headed by Russian Deputy Defense Minister Yunus Bekyev-Durov. Due to the country's expulsion of French troops earlier this year, which sparked rumors of deeper security ties with Russia, these moves have put Burkina Faso's connections with Moscow in the public eye. Russia is seen as the West's enemy, hence allying with it entails directly opposing the West. It also makes it quite evident that Burkina Faso will select its partners based on the advantages they provide, rather than evaluating their legitimacy based on whether or not they are Western foes. The Russian delegation and Burkina Faso met and discussed areas of cooperation, with a particular focus on military issues. Indeed, the two nations are considering military cooperation, which the West fears. Discussions of teaching Burkinabe officers and cadets at different levels, maybe including pilot training in Russia, were part of this. However, whether Russian military trainers would be sent to Burkina Faso was not specifically mentioned in the official announcement. In the past, Burkina Faso's troops were largely influenced by France, because the majority of them received their training at French-established institutions. But now that Russia has entered the game, things will be different. Burkina Faso's interim president, Captain Ibrahim Traore, was in St. Petersburg earlier in late July for the second Russia-Africa conference. A year and a half after the crisis in Ukraine began, this meeting represents a significant diplomatic and economic challenge for Russian President Vladimir Putin. The administration of President Traore has faced extraordinary obstacles, primarily in response to an increase in Islamist assaults since he became office in October 2022. He responded by asking Russia for assistance, and in March he acquired attack helicopters and munitions. Now, talks in St. Petersburg center on new military and commercial pacts as Burkina Faso seeks to fight terrorism with Moscow's active and proactive participation. As these diplomatic discussions continue, there are also rumors of secret agreements that could allow Russia to get under international sanctions, especially after it started to deviate from European markets. In order to strengthen Burkina Faso's advantageous partnership with Russia, the discussions seek to find answers for the country's security and progress. These covered agreements might emphasize a win-win approach, in which both nations want to gain advantages while excluding the West. Ibrahim Traore formally referred to Russia as Burkina Faso's strategic ally for this reason. This was a clear indication to the West that, in spite of the earlier call to denounce Russia in the conflict in Ukraine, Burkina Faso would work with it and strike agreements. As anti-French sentiment has increased in some areas of the region, there are now concerns regarding Ouagadougou's ties with Moscow. February, an agreement that had permitted France to fight armed groups in Burkina Faso since 2013 was terminated, and French troops were expelled. Traoré was asked about Burkina Faso's foreign partners in the protracted violence, which has terminated thousands of people and displaced approximately 2.5 million in the larger Sahel region over the past 10 years. During a rare broadcast interview, the French army's withdrawal does not imply that France is no longer an ally, Traoré said. We have new forms of collaboration and strategic alliances. For instance, Russia is a crucial partner. Ibrahim Traore demonstrated to the West in a few phrases that Burkina Faso is not forced to take sides. Instead, it will interact with all nations, which is a policy that African nations sorely need. I am happy with the cooperation with Russia, he added. It's honest, he replied, sitting in a beret and military uniform. Now, Russia's expanding power in the Sahel and neighboring areas worries Western countries. After the Mali military government started working with the Russian military contractor Wagner Group to fight armed groups, France pulled its troops out of the country last year. This demonstrates that no Western nation feels hostile as long as the West remains in Africa. But African nations do feel endangered if they interact with Russia. However, Ibrahim Traore is indifferent to it. He is just concerned with what is beneficial to his nation, not with what the West would find acceptable. In order to strengthen the nation's electrical supply, Burkina Faso's military officials have inked a deal with Russia to construct a nuclear power plant. After a falling out with the majority of its Western allies, this is the junta's most recent attempt to ally itself with Russia. Knowing that Russia is a key friend, Ibrahim Traore has looked to Russia for military and economic support since taking office last year. In order to meet Burkina Faso's energy needs as well as those of its neighbors, Captain Traoré asked President Putin for help in building a nuclear power plant in the country. We have an urgent need for energy, he emphasized. This is a crucial issue for us since we need to build a nuclear power plant in Burkina Faso to generate electricity, if at all possible. Because we are located in the center of West Africa, our location is strategically significant, and the sub-region is experiencing an energy deficit. However, the word nuclear has terrified Westerners. The possibility that Russia is providing Burkina Faso with nuclear secrets could cause problems in the West and turn the nation into a nuclear state. Initially, nevertheless, this agreement is a component of Burkina Faso's objective to get 50% access to electricity in rural areas and 95% in urban areas by 2030. At the moment, according to the International Energy Agency, oil products make about 1/3 of Burkina Faso's total energy supply, with the majority of the country's energy coming from biofuels like wood and charcoal. Although South Africa is now the only country in Africa to produce nuclear power for commercial use, other nations are progressively following suit. Following an agreement made in 2017 by Presidents Putin and Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Russia is helping Egypt build a nuclear power plant at a cost of $30 billion. In the same year, Russia and Nigeria inked an agreement to construct power plants in Nigeria, albeit the project has not yet started. By 2027, Kenya intends to build its first nuclear power station. Sub-Saharan Africa continues to struggle with low rates of electrification, even if access to energy has improved recently. According to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, more than half of the population does not have access to electricity. The irony is that African nations remain in the dark despite having abundant natural riches. However, Russia isn't. Ibrahim Traoré's sole ally is this nation. Burkina Faso's leader has said so publicly. As part of their recently restored diplomatic ties, the country is interested in purchasing more weapons from North Korea. Indeed, Ibrahim Traoré is forming an alliance with Kim Jong-un, the ruler of North Korea and the only individual who truly terrifies the West. Similar to Russia, Ibrahim Traoré emphasized, North Korea can be extremely helpful in supporting Burkina Faso's overall growth and security. Traoré admitted that the military of Burkina Faso continues to use North Korean weapons that were given to them in 1985, saying, "North Korea has a lot of capabilities. You should be aware that resuming diplomatic relations with North Korea is a significant demonstration of power, as the majority of countries in the world do not have ties with North Korea because of orders from the West." Ibrahim Traore continued by explaining that the weapons, including heavy armaments, are still being used in their armed forces, and they are looking to acquire more to support their continued efforts. This comes after Ouagadougou announced in late March that an agreement was approved to send a North Korean ambassador to Burkina Faso, potentially paving the way for the two countries to engage in a weapons trade, which was likely the apex of Burkina Faso-North Korean relations. Earlier, Thomas Sankara, who is frequently credited with founding Burkina Faso, visited North Korea in person to meet with North Korean leader Kim Il-sung. Kim allegedly gave Sankara an ivory pistol that Sankara regularly carried. Nearly 50 years later, Traoré, the military leader of Burkina Faso, who his supporters frequently compare to Sankara, is calling for a strategic alliance with nations such as Russia, Turkey, and North Korea, emphasizing, "Our interests come first, regardless of the ally or nation. We prioritize our interests. We will work with those who are willing to support us in this ongoing struggle, giving us equipment and assistance." Add your voice to the total liberation of Africa by leaving a comment in the comments section below. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more informative videos like this one. Let's proceed. Since taking office last year, Traoré has pledged to reclaim about 40% of the country's territory, which has been lost to extremist organizations linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State since 2015. The Burkina Faso leader is relying on old allies like North Korea for material and logistical support in the fight against these extremist groups. But it is important to remember that UN Resolution 2270 clearly forbids the trade of weapons to and from North Korea. The method by which Burkina Faso plans to import weapons from North Korea is still unknown, but it makes it clear that Burkina Faso is independent and free to choose what it wants. In this case, the West must realize that, like any other country, African nations have the right to independently determine their foreign policy, and that they are free to choose their partners and allies based on what they believe to be their national interests. This essence of sovereignty emphasizes that these countries are not subject to outside influences or control when defining their foreign policy, but even if African leaders were aware of this, they chose to be the West's puppets, selling their allegiance and national interests. But Ibrahim Traore is different, and he knows how to deal with the West, so he is allying with and purchasing weapons from any country he wants. This is a huge blow to the West and its armed factories, which profit hundreds of billions of dollars by selling weapons all over the world. Ibrahim Traore wants to make Burkina Faso an independent country, with the power to decide for itself and diversify its allies. But he knows that this path won't be easy, as Thomas Sankara tried this before him. But he was murdered, and his legacy was lost, which Ibrahim Traore wants to restore. Could have set the country on a significantly different developmental path if he had survived. Often referred to as Africa's Che Guevara, Sankara was a charismatic reformer and a Marxist authoritarian. He bestowed upon Burkina Faso its name, which translates to "land of honest people" in the majority Muri language. Seizing power in a 1983 coup, led by junior army officers at the age of 33, Sankara started a journey of radical transformation in his country's conservative society. His objectives included eliminating foreign debt, achieving food self-sufficiency, and reducing the influence of France, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. Yes, Ibrahim Traore is much like him. Thomas Sankara enhanced the literacy rate, immunized children, weakened the grip of wealthy elites, redistributed land to the impoverished, boosted agricultural output, combated desertification, and streamlined bureaucracy salaries and perks. Interestingly, more focus has been placed on his modest income and lifestyle than on his boldest and most visionary reforms, his pro-war man policies and programs. Sankara advocated for girls to complete secondary school, introduced voluntary family planning initiatives, and ensured that pregnant students could return to school to complete their education. His government also banned female genital cutting, forced marriages, and polygamy. Women were appointed to cabinet positions and other high-ranking government positions. It was the first African government to integrate women into the military. However, Sankara's revolutionary journey ended tragically when his regime was overthrown in a coup on October 15, 1987. Led by Blaise Compaoré, who had previously been Sankara's closest friend and a loyal cabinet member. Some believe that Compaoré's support came from powerful conservatives in Burkina Faso, while others speculate that it may have also received support from Côte d'Ivoire and possibly France. Captain Ibrahim Traore is aware that in order to bring about radical changes, he must first consolidate power and make sure he survives. This is because he is aware of the history where the most powerful heads of state were assassinated. The military leader of Burkina Faso announced that elections were no longer top priority compared to the urgent issue of security. This announcement was made nearly a year after Traoré took power in a coup, during which he first promised to return to democracy with presidential elections scheduled for July 2024, and revealed plans to amend the country's constitution to better represent the interests of the masses. Traoré clarified, "It's not a priority. I'll be clear about that. Security takes precedence with regard to the elections. The nation has been grappling with jihadist violence, so security is a matter of paramount concern." At the time of his rise to power, Traoré had set a goal to bolster security in Burkina Faso within 2 to 3 months. But a year later, the country continues to contend with jihadist attacks. Traoré became the youngest leader in history. Ibrahim Traoré, who was sworn in as interim president with a pledge to retake land and ease a transitional period before the July 2024 elections, also announced plans to amend the country's constitution to some extent. He told state television that the current constitution primarily represented the views of a small number of enlightened people, to the detriment of the general populace. He said that he has long-term plans to make sure that whoever comes to power feels obligated to serve his people, not the interests of the West. He also wants to make his country and Africa economically robust so that the presidents don't have to sell their allegiance to the West. Yet paradoxically, it remains one of the poorest continents. This conundrum highlights the complex phenomenon known as the resource curse. In 1997, American economists Jeffrey Sachs and Andrew Warner made a crucial observation. Countries rich in natural resources tend to perform poorly economically. This is not just a random observation. It's a broader correlation, characterized by a negative relationship between a country's natural resource exports and its GDP growth per capita. Put simply, the more a country relies on exporting its resources as a percentage of its GDP, the slower its real GDP growth per capita. Sachs and Warner's work emphasized, none of the countries with extremely abundant natural resources in 1970 experienced significant economic growth over the next 20 years. In fact, most of the countries that did achieve rapid growth during that period began with meager natural resources. Many sub-Saharan African nations exhibit signs of the resource curse. Despite their wealth in oil, diamonds, and other precious minerals, countries like Angola, Nigeria, and Sudan grapple with low average incomes and subpar health indicators. Captain Ibrahim Traore felt anger at how African leaders allowed the West to exploit their resources. In exchange for small profits, he intends to retake all of Burkina Faso's gold mines, making sure that the gains benefit Burkina Faso's citizens first, and then others. Ibrahim Traoré's challenge to the West is something that the West has never done before, so the road ahead can be quite challenging, but African leaders who are trying to make significant positive changes in their countries frequently face serious consequences, such as being removed from power or even terminated. Leaders like Muammar Gaddafi of Libya and Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso took office with the intention of challenging the country's existing social, political, and economic systems, driven by a desire to implement significant changes and tackle enduring problems like poverty, corruption. They were assassinated because the reforms advocated by leaders like Gaddafi and Sankara posed a significant threat to the established order. Their goals included reducing the influence of foreign powers and multinational corporations over their country's resources and economies, a direct challenge to the interests of these external actors. No one had anticipated that these leaders, who were adored by their people, would be made to appear like a threat. The West used its covert tactics to create opposition to these leaders, escalating to the point of violent overthrows or assassinations. These policies frequently upset established power structures and vested interests, challenging the status quo. Gaddafi was overthrown and terminated in 2011 during the Libyan civil war with the help of Western powers, and Thomas Sankara was assassinated in a coup led by his close friend Blaise Compaoré in 1987, with suspicions of outside intervention. The experiences of leaders such as Gaddafi and Sankara serve as a warning to aspiring African leaders who may want to bring about radical change in their countries and are afraid of the dire consequences they may face, such as the possibility of being overthrown, driven into exile, or even assassinated. Despite this, Ibrahim Traore is unwilling to change his position. He has vowed to make Burkina Faso completely independent again, where the people would prosper, and he has expelled all Western troops, making it impossible for the West to stage his replacement or assassination. We're going to bring videos on something that no one talks about. Will Ibrahim Traore succeed in destroying the West's influence in Burkina Faso and Africa? Or will he be secretly terminated for Western control in Africa to continue? Tell us what you think in the comments section below. We explore the rich history, culture, and the ongoing struggle for sovereignty in Africa. Join us in this important conversation by subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you're not just staying informed. You're becoming part of a movement dedicated to reclaiming Africa's rightful place on the global stage. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Let's work together to spread knowledge and inspire change. Thanks for watching.